Hey guys, welcome. In this video, we are going to be looking at implementing the sound effects that we downloaded from before. The first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to talk a little bit about how Unity handles sounds. And I think it's important for us to just see the different file types that Unity supports. So we'll say here Unity audio file formats in just a Google search engine here and go to the documentation. You will see here there's a nice little chart here that shows you what the supported formats are. My recommendation for you guys is stick to the ones that you know. Most of you know about MP3s, you know about waves, you may know about OGGs as well, okay? But in general, most audio files are going to be MP3s and .waves, and so just stick with those for now. These other file formats are a little bit more specialized, and you may want to look into these if you are developing for environments like a smartphone or for specific devices. Smartphones in particular, they don't have as much processing power or as much storage capabilities as a personal computer or some home consoles, and so you may want to look into things like compression settings and whatnot with all that. So stick to the things you know. That's really what we should be doing here. And so that is that. When you download this audio into your project, Unity will automatically detect that it is an audio file, and it will essentially treat it as if it's a Unity audio file that it can deal with. When you select something like this, as you can see here, I'm in the Deep in Space folder here. When you select this, you are presented with import settings on the right side. I recommend keeping these as all defaults for now. We don't have to worry about these unless we're really thinking about like crunching down compression, really crunching down size and whatnot. But one thing I will point out to us here is these tabs along the top right here, these reflect the different builds that we are currently working on. So we have a default version of this. We also have the PC Mac Linux standalone build and the WebGL build. And so this is a nice little tool here because you can tailor the import settings for PC and change it for WebGL depending on the platform you're developing for, but you can still develop the same game for that, okay? Now, what's nice about this is when you select this item here, you also get this little area at the bottom right corner where it allows you to preview the sounds as you need. And so if you click on it, you'll have these controls here in the top right corner of that small window. And if I can hit play here. Now that's quite loud. That's something we can adjust a little bit later on. There is the auto turn on and auto turn off play feature here. This simply means if I check this. Oh no, I lost it. There we go. I have lost my preview. If I turn this off, if I turn that on, it's going to automatically play that file every time it is selected, and that's something we don't want to do here. So I generally keep that off. You do have the loop function as well to test out the looping function and a few different minor options here that we're not going to look at. But you can preview this inside of Unity and listen to it. And so we're going to start off with just this file here, okay? This is going to be our background music. It is actually quite simple to get this working. We just now need to understand that little process right now. So how does audio work in Unity? Well, we are working in a 2D environment. And so because we are in a 2D environment, Unity will automatically know we are in a 2D environment, and it's going to treat our audio also as a 2D environment, okay? So if we're thinking of modern day 3D games, particularly competitive games, sounds are very important, especially if you think of games like first-person shooters, Call of Duty, PUBG, Fortnite, whatever you want to call it there. These are particularly important because the sounds will often give away positions of possible opponents and your friends. And so 3D sounds, the positioning of the audio in the game world is very, very important. And Unity does support 3D audio. Basically, audio is treated as if it's a component on a game object that we are going to have here. Now, in a 2D setting, all of the audio is generally flat, which just means that there is no real positioning of the sound. So for instance, if I talk this way, or if I talk somewhere further away from the microphone, it's going to affect how you hear the audio itself. Remember, as I move away from you, you will begin to not hear me quite as well until a point where everything just dies off. It's important to realize that in 2D, usually the sound is quite flat. There is no real like distance and whatnot, so it's much simpler than I would imagine in a 3D environment. we have to pick what sort of object is going to store this game object. Now, it's very common here to have audio sources attached directly to my camera, and there's a reason for that. If you've played around with this, you may have actually already seen this, but our camera has a component that we haven't talked about at all, and that's this little one here called the audio listener. The audio listener is a component. It has no settings, nothing that you can affect there. In effect, what this represents is it represents the ears that are in my game world, right? So this is saying that my main camera is where all of the audio in my game world is going to feed into, okay? So basically wherever my camera is in the game world, that's where I would be in the game world, as where all these sounds would be. Now again, because we are in a 2D environment, there is no real sense of distance or anything like that. You can play around with things like stereo sound if you wanted to have left channel, right channel sound, but for our purposes here, just while we're learning, we don't have to worry about that. So a main camera is actually a pretty good candidate to include something like background music, because our background music is always going to play, it'll always be present, and it should always basically be being played with the action that we are seeing through the camera. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to add this audio to my main camera. And in order to do that, we need to add a new component to our main camera here called an audio source. Okay, an audio source right there. An audio source is exactly as the name suggests. It is a location where audio will be projected out of. The first property here is the actual audio clip itself, and that is the actual file that we have downloaded to our project. So we can't click on this and just drag it right in there. Now, I mentioned before, it can take literal seconds to get this to work. If you drag that into the audio clip section here, just hit play, and you'll see music is already playing with my game. It's just that easy, okay? But let's go look at a few other things here. The next one here is the audio mixer group. I don't cover this in this class here, but in future classes that I do teach, I do talk about the audio mixer group. If you have any experience as an audio engineer or even something like a DJ, you will understand about mixing channels. Okay, so we have various channels of audio and how to mix them. You actually can do that virtually here through Unity. Unity does provide that functionality. In our case here, we don't really care about that now. We just want to get something simple going for a game, but this does allow you to add things like reverb and high pass, low pass audio filters as well. That's all good stuff. Here we have the option for mute. Okay, again, quick reminder, all of this can be changed in code. So if you need to mute your audio from code because you're doing something, then you can do that. These bypass statements here, effects, listener effects, and reverb zone. This is if you're adding any sort of effects to the sound, you can bypass them and just listen to the default one. This one here is important. This is the play on awake. Play on awake basically means that whenever this object, this main camera object, is created and awoken, it will also play this sound automatically. If I uncheck this and try and go play, okay, you'll see my audio does not play at all. So we want to have this set up for this. There's also loop. Okay, I mentioned what loop is. In our case here for the background music, I do want this to loop because I want it to continuously go as far as I can. And then we have a couple slider values here down towards the bottom. First slider value here is priority. This is essentially certain audio sounds should take priority over other audio sounds, especially if they are important and contextual. So, you know, if I'm giving out information about an enemy base, or if I'm, you know, saying, oh, this flag was captured, that usually will take higher priority over other audios. And so audio with higher priority will be more inclined to be played over top of other audios as well. Volume, very important for this. We can lower the volume of our background music. I'll do it to about 0.5. Hopefully that is a little bit nicer. Let's see here. We can even go even further down to about 0.25, I think. Okay. And just something subtle in the background. You can also change this dynamically if you wanted to. Pitch, if you've played around with pitch, you'll know that this is now at 100%. If I change this, you can see I can kind of speed it up and make the pitch different. I can bring the pitch down. You may be wondering, like, where is this actually used? But it's actually used in a few different games as well. One of the most clever ways I've seen pitch used in games before is you would have a regular music like this, okay? And then all of a sudden you would hit, let's say, the pause menu, okay? And you would pause the game and the pitch would go down to something like this. Right? It's still the same song. You're not loading in any extra files. You're just playing it slightly differently for the pause menu. And it's so powerful because you have one file doing the work of potentially 2, 3, or 4 files that you would have otherwise. And so playing around with pitch value is really important. Stereo pan is exactly as you expect, a left channel, right channel. Okay, so if I go right channel, I'll tell you, you can't hear it, but on my headphones here, my right ear hears everything, or my left ear. Generally, we want to keep this towards the middle, I would say. You can get very clever here, have some sounds that come from the right and move towards the left as well. That's perfectly fine too, but in general, we're going to keep this as 0. Spatial blend refers to whether we are in 2D space or 3D space. I'll keep that to 2D space. And then our reverb zone mix, I generally keep this at 0, okay? Down here, we do have our 3D sound settings. We don't touch this, obviously we're in 2D, but you can see here the default is this logarithmic roll-off. This basically says, our speed, the sound that we hear has a logarithmic roll-off. Basically, as I move away from you, the amount of sound that reaches my ear logarithmically becomes less and less and less. You can change this if necessary, but we're not going to touch that here. Okay, and so that is us adding literally a background music in 10 seconds. Okay, we add an audio component, drag in that file around there, and then go from there. In the next video, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at adding sound effects. And we're going to add sound effects in 2 places. We're going to add it with our laser, and we're going to add it with our explosion. We'll see you then.